Coming to you from beyond the final frontier, it's Archaeowolf.
So thank you guys for joining us. I have to say, before we get started, that I had only seen Stargate one time, and that was when it came out in 1994. So rewatching it was a real interesting ride for me because I could remember some of it when I was rewatching it, but a lot of it was like, oh wow, I didn't remember hardly any of it. So it was really wonderful, wonderful. So anybody who hasn't been here before, the general breakdown is we're going to go through the movie plot points. We're going to discuss both the archaeological and theological impact of this very famous movie. And if we do well, I might try to convince my favorite archaeologists to possibly do the series with me at some point.
You know I'm down for that.
And I'm pretty
Who's
good
that?
with you guys.
I'm still setting this thing up. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, take your time. Take your time. Just let us know when you are ready. I have my notes here. I know Howard also
I want to
rewatched the
make
movie
one.
recently.
I want to say one thing. My whole setup here is now balanced precariously on a number of different archaeology and anthropology books, and then two books that I got from my grandfather, and I don't know where he got them, but they're like the architectural breakdowns of Rouen and Calais, and these books were published in 1901.
Oh my god!
Like rice paper drawings of the buildings and everything that probably don't exist anymore thanks to the Germans.
That is, oh my goodness, I'm a little jealous. I'm going to be real here. I will be honest, I am obviously outnumbered. For those of you who don't know all of this, my name is Rabbi Hannah. I not only am a rabbi, but I do have a PhD in theology, given to me in 2008 after a long, hard road to it. I'm going to let the gentlemen introduce themselves, and then we will get started. You're up in the corner
Are you
there,
waiting?
nerd.
I'm a nerd, and yeah, archaeology is cool. There you go. I did that just to get a reaction out of Howard. I'm currently an undergrad in California, and a big nerd who has a shed, hence the name.
Here we go.
Gentlemen,
Go for it, Howard.
after you, Morgan.
Oh, great.
Oh, he's eating. I can introduce. I'm Howard Williams. I come under the name of Archaeowolf on various social media accounts, and I am a professor of archaeology when I'm not sleeping, and sometimes when I am sleeping.
Yes, thank you for joining us so late. I appreciate you taking the time because right now it's midnight in Wales, so I appreciate that you are spending so much time with us when it's so late at night.
Even the whales are sleeping in Wales.
And then Morgan.
There's Wales and Wales. What?
Around Wales.
That's me, Morgan. I go by Archaeowolf on TikTok and pretty much every other social media platform. I am also a huge nerd, and I'm an archaeologist that works for the federal government, which might actually play into this a little bit more than it could, but hey, I work for the Department of the Interior doing cultural resource management archaeology out of the Missoula field office here. So my jurisdiction is like all of around me.
I love it. I love it. And yeah, and I'm the odd man out here. So to get us started, I would like to say, as I mentioned before, I had not actually seen the movie since 1994. I do know it is a favorite of Archaeowolf's, and of course, I had seen parts of the series, and I really love the series. But to go back and really rewatch how it started, there are a lot of things that stuck out to me. But I'd like to ask you guys first, what are some of the overarching themes of this movie that you think make it popular even in 2023?
Aside from there's so many people who want to buy the Ancient Aliens go,
There it is.
I think it is good science fiction. It is just campy enough to be funny, and to be enjoyable and not too serious. But the story is good, the acting is good, the the and you want it to be serious, which is maybe why it's so people want it to be real so much. Um, and it's definitely a departure from the alien movies being that other alien sci-fi movies being that it's all kind of innate. I think we recognize everything in it because Egyptology has been around for 250 years, and so much of the public, that's all they know about archaeology outside of Indiana Jones, is everybody thinks archaeology is only in Egypt. 9 out of 10, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd say that it's just good sci-fi.
And that 1 out of 10
That I
thinks
agree
it's
with.
dinosaurs.
What about you two? What do you think are some of the overarching themes that still stick out to people even now?
I,
You
I
nerd.
would put, I would mimic what Morgan said.
Sorry.
This is going to be the shortest, quietest live we've ever had.
I, shall I say something? I
Yes.
think I remember watching it. I've once, I think, all the way through in the '90s, and then seeing it fragments on TV at various points. But I watched through it all entirely today, and for me, I think it's a very well edited and structured story. Sense of adventure and detection, the combo of an archaeologist as detective, other ancillary archaeologists. There's different archaeologists or none of them are actually archaeologists, but various people who have pretenses of being archaeologists involved in the storyline, and it captures that sense of it's science fiction as an ancient alien baddie. There's underdogs. There's a slave class to be saved or to be mobilized to save themselves from their servitude, and it's got some action. It's got some, none of it seems really make sense, but then that's fine. But it concludes in a nice package. So even if there hadn't been a subsequent series, I think it did stand alone rather than certain other franchises that try to milk so I think it has
All of
gained
them.
or retained popularity because it is a singular. I'm not taking it. I haven't seen the series, I confess, but I'm just saying, as a standalone movie, it has, I think, retained popularity not only because of the ancient aliens tropes, but because it's a one-off. It stands as a sort of, it's become a modern classic because it isn't repeated, hasn't been milked out as other movies. I think that may be one of the things. So those are my immediate responses, but I have lots of detailed thoughts on how it represents archaeologists,
I know it.
archaeology,
Love it.
and of course
Yeah.
how it represents death as and attitudes to death are central to how the baddies and the goodies are characterized and their attitudes to, what happens to them. So though, but in terms of its popularity, I think it's to do with it's a one-off. No one's tried to remake it as a film, and something so and I think it has many other tropes that it captures into those detective slash adventure tropes that good archaeology in sci-fi does best.
I love this answer. My next question would be, I noticed right at the beginning of the movie we have Daniel Jackson, and it literally hit me as I was watching this with Nerd. I was like, oh, now I get it, because I had seen Morgan a few times in videos say, if I'm gonna do my Daniel Jackson, I better get on my glasses. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, now I get it. Now I get it. But what I noticed is this sudden military come in and say, no, now we're kind of taking over. We use you for what we want to use you for. How accurate do you think that beginning is in terms of if we were to find this kind of technology, would they not inform the linguist or the archaeologist of what job they're actually performing and kind of keep them in the dark?
Yes.
That
There's,
would
there's all sorts of stuff. Like if you look at like technological stuff in the Second World War, there were teams of people working on things that they didn't know were supposed to connect to other things. I think in an effort to control information, should the Stargate ever be found, yeah, they would have people brought in, but they would keep them quarantined as to what it actually is, or they would make up some sort of, you know, or they would walk into it, and this actually plays into the third series of Stargate a little bit. If you
okay.
guys haven't seen that, there is a part where they do the where they literally take a book or a page out of the modern recruitment book, and they have a character playing a video game, and he figures out the puzzle. And essentially, what they have them do in the game is exactly what they have him do in real life, in the series, but it's packaged in a video game. Channel the energy into the weapon and destroy the enemy spaceship. Great, it's a great game, but then it actually, holy shit, that's what he actually has to do.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I think they would work on this. They would package it differently. They would keep the groups separated, and then put it all together. Yeah. Ender's Game is a good example of that too.
That's very true. Another question I have is kind of like about the timeline. We noticed that suddenly Daniel Jackson cracks the code, and like within minutes after Daniel Jackson cracking this code, he's got a camo jacket and a hat on, and they're going to be going through this gate. And Nerd pointed out that they have him at the back, and he's supposed to be the payload. One, why is he at the back? If he's supposed to be the payload, why wouldn't he be surrounded by, military protection? And two, I mean, I don't work in archaeology. How clear are we that would be the timeline? Okay, we cracked the code, and now within 24 hours, we're sending somebody through this.
Can I just interrupt there and say that, of course, with his plans, because he's obviously a complete delusional fantasist, and he has no career, has no money, and no one will. He can't even lecture. He can't even coherently answer a question. He asserts that because
there's a lunch somewhere.
Yeah, he doesn't even understand. He's supposed to be such a nerd or such a fantasist. He doesn't realise that he is such a loser that he can't even finish. He can't even answer. He asserts that the Khufu inscription in the pyramids is a fake, and then never answers how. So he's a useless communicator. He would survive 10 seconds on TikTok, but and then he somehow these and maybe this is a classic parody of the American military machine, that he just says, oh, I can get us back if we go through. And they go, oh, okay then. They do. Well, how would you do that? This is based on constellations which are basically, my understanding, limited understanding of astrophysics and astronomy, is that constellations are relatively near in our spiral arm of the Milky Way. So how, in another part of the entire universe, he's going to work out what constellations relate to what symbols that he needs to find a way home? How does that even work out for the most simple logical sense? But they go, okay, he knows how to get back, so and then, as you rightly say, he goes at the back like a tagging on. And that's the idea, I suppose, is his character. Any geekish character with unkept hair who has allergies, therefore can't be a proper manly man, and so has to fall. And then he's just there at the back going, oh, I'm kind of an extra. Yeah, it doesn't make sense, does it? But I think it's really funny. I think, whether you see it as intended or accidental, I think it does sort of play into that sort of, we could have pulled in the best Egyptologists in the entire world to this US military secret project. Instead, we get some rando who we interview by showing him a picture of his parents in a your bags, sir, and then leave his bags in the rain. And by the way, that's another advert for everyone. If anyone offers you a job in a car while they leave your luggage of your only 2 bags of belongings in the rain, getting wet, you can kind of go, no thanks, I don't think so. And the only sort of test of you is, are these your parents? It's like he knows what his parents look like once in a grainy photograph, so that confirms his identity. It's hilarious. It doesn't make any sense, but this is movies. But my point would be, yeah, if he is really supposed to be like the the linchpin of the entire project is going to get them home, they would at least have asked, how are you going to do that? And secondly, you go first. After
Well,
but it's funny, isn't it?
that's the magic of movie making, though, because he is, like you said, the linchpin. So they have to focus on him having this moment of seeing all of his hypotheses actually come to fruition, which is everybody else just kind of goes through the gate and they don't give a shit. But he's sitting there like this is the moment. So they have to focus on that just a little bit, and that's just the storytelling.
But I also
I
like
do
I
like
like the
that
fact that
point.
he's got no archaeological understanding. He's supposed to be a linguist, and he has no understanding of how to begin to communicate without words to anyone other than that they use hand gestures. And then within seconds, he's worked out their entire language, but only through the hieroglyphs, not through what they're actually saying to him. So you'd think he would have thought, maybe if this is a dialect that has originated over 1,000 years evolution for ancient Egyptian, we'd be able to start with some basic words for water, sky, and then work out from there. But no, he has to wait until the girl takes him to this subterranean space where secret symbols are still being recorded, and then he goes, I just find it all really amusing.
Well, that's
So
So
movie magic.
So I will say, from my perspective as a theologian, seeing Daniel stand and touching, the Stargate itself, and see, you see that moment where he's putting his hands into it. For me, as a theologian, that has very much parallels in the idea that we actually are constantly reaching out to be able to touch the face of God, or what we think is the face of creation. So for me, seeing that moment with Daniel is almost, that's the moment for him. His life's work, yes, he seems to be very bumbling. No one wants to hire him. They think he's a crackpot. But this is it. This is the moment that he proves that everything he's worked towards and everything he believes is in fact reality. And that is that God moment for him, where he gets to live the reality that he's been trying to convince other people exist. And so I was just like, I like this moment because of that. I did agree with Nerd, like, why is he in the back? But again, as Morgan points out, it has a lot to do with the movie making and giving him that moment to kind of breathe in and have this moment as this is a Stargate. This is everything that he's been talking about up till now in his.
check again. I don't think
I
it does,
knew it.
because I would suggest that what happens is he has some vague understanding there may be an older culture that in the writing system that's developed in the first and second dynasties, but he doesn't even believe that the Stargate can be 10,000 years old. He doesn't believe that. He turns and goes, but Egyptian culture wasn't even created by that point, and we never get a resolution on that, and we don't even understand why.
That's Kurt Russell's fault.
Why exactly?
Because
read
he
it in a
comes in and
dossier.
says, he's like,
Ah, no,
no, we're not talking about this no more.
That's true. That's true. And
And they
do you
use the
guys-
sonic and radiocarbon dating, the carbon and sonic dating, which which shows that this not alien mineral. How did they date this alien mineral? Or was it the stone?
what
So
I
the
said.
stone had carbon and sonic. I don't know what because I don't know what that is.
So do we think that, I mean, obviously, as this came out in 1994, and here we have Kurt Russell as very, he's got a lot of PTSD. We know he went through trauma, where we're introduced to the fact that his son shot himself accidentally, and, he has a lot of guilt over that. We see that with him sitting on his son's bed. And do we think that they chose him because they knew it was going to be ultimately a suicide mission and Kurt Russell's character wanted to die anyway? Or was this a way for him to regain some hope? Do you think the outcome is different than what the objective was for Kurt Russell's character?
I think the outcome was immensely different for his character, because the implication from the beginning with the secret bomb and that him and Jackson have a conversation about it. You were never planning on going home.
Yeah.
Um, would the U.S. military use somebody who is in such a dark place in their life as a sacrificial bomb? Well, I'm sure they would.
Oh, I have
Most
absolutely
militaries
no doubt.
have.
I have I have no doubt about that.
Or have weaponized, some, intense feelings like that, whether it's grief or honor or loyalty to the emperor, or take your pick on any of the you know uh, situations where people in the military, regardless of whose military, have been asked to do something extraordinary for their country. But he I think, um, I mean, of course, it all happens in 5 minutes, which which wouldn't happen. But Jackson convinces him, you know, to not go through with it.
Right.
And then they have, of course, America, you still have to blow something up,
Right.
and they manage
Have
to
to.
blow up
Can't
the
bring it
bad
home.
guy.
They did. They did. And I have to say, for me, the introduction of Ra as an alien kind of brings into light theologically this idea that all of our deities do not actually exist, except they exist as alien creatures from other worlds, and then our humanity and our human understanding then made them into deities. And I can imagine that at the time, the pushback, especially from certain religious communities, was very loud. We're basically saying, one, we have these idolistic gods, Egyptian gods. I am a personal fan of course, Ra, Horus, Anubis, and the whole lot. I've always loved Egyptian pantheon, but again, I'm a theologian. I've got to like a lot of things. Seeing Ra portrayed as an alien, I I wonder then, because for me, seeing it now, I'm like, so what we're saying is the gods never have existed, so no gods existed. They are actually aliens who have just commanded over, you know, humanity and made us believe they were alien, or made us believe there were gods. And in one way of doing that, as we know, Ross said the tribal people couldn't read or write. They weren't allowed to write. They weren't allowed to read. And as Howard has heard me say, if you want to keep people under your thumb, you keep them ill-educated and you keep them dumb. You keep them, So this was something interesting to me, and how much it pushes back on the idea of, especially, people are going to get mad at me, but especially the idea of Christianity. The idea that, our gods are all made up, or they could actually be in terms of planets, especially when we find out that the premise of this is that humanity has been transplanted here to Earth from these other galaxies, from these other planets, to be slaves. And how else do you enslave people? But, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
That's a twist around. Well,
Yes.
actually, so how nerd do we want to get on this? Because here's a
Nerd
rabbit
it.
hole that I could jump down.
By all
Take it up.
means.
So the thing that I like, the thing about the movie that I think is fantastic is that Howard's right. It's tied up by itself in a pretty bow. It's done. You don't need to have a sequel. When they made the series, they picked up a year after the movie in that universe. And they didn't try to remake it. They managed to make a natural progression, I suppose, of what would continue to happen, because you can't just take the lid off of Pandora's box, run into some aliens, blow up one of them, and not get noticed. So as the show progressed, it answers a lot of the questions that the movie kind of has, because you have all the way through, and I mean, this goes into the Atlantis series end universe. You have tie-ins to where humans were brought to Earth, and they are the second evolution of a species that is from another universe or another galaxy that, rose, fell, changed, evolved, etc., so forth. And you have interactions with aliens, the Gould, in their attempt to exist and maintain a civilization and culture, if you will, even though they're just parasites. Yeah, all of that kind of gets tied up in in the show, which I think is actually quite good. But you have to watch the show,
What I've
Howard.
seen of it was.
Does the show explore the backstory of what happens between 1928 and 1994, 95, whenever?
It does.
Right.
It does.
That was a question I had
there
too.
is
Why do we jump?
there is an episode that takes place in 1946, 46 or 47, where they have like the first attempts of the scientists in the U.S. military to monkey around with this thing. That episode is called "The Torment of Tantalus."
I love that you know the name of the episode. That tells me a lot about how much you love this.
And then they actually did make a series that was on, I want to say, just Amazon, that is supposed to be the girl who finds the locket. She has some adventures as a young woman with the Stargate and stuff before the U.S. military figures it out, or during the war or something like that, where the Nazis are trying to get a hold of it because, Hellboy. It's just this, these crazy little tropes. I've actually not watched that. I haven't seen that one. But they do have a number of instances where they go back in time in the TV show, because it's sci-fi. That's the thing. It's like I do get in some of it where they're like, we have Star Trek, which is on a starship. This is great. Let's get rid of that because starship sets are expensive. But if we can, pretend we travel through a wormhole and then just saves us money, and we can buy real sandwiches. So, but yeah, they do explore the backstory, and then they do a lot of tie-in, especially in the later seasons, and then in Atlantis and stuff, where they have either flashbacks or reflections, or they manage to run into somebody who is from that time period because, cryogenic freezing, or, traveling almost light speed for 10,000 years only translates into like 8 years for them or something like that. It's extensive. I mean, it is extensive.
So, Howard and Allie, let me ask you a couple questions. What ways, I have twofold questions, and also for you as well, Morgan. When in watching this movie for me, I have a question about why do we think, and you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, Morgan, but why we think that Egyptology is kind of the stand-in for all things archaeology for this movie, and what are some places where they get archaeology right?
Things are in the dirt. I mean, they get it right there. But that's about it as far as accuracy goes.
I'd be willing to say in the very beginning, the way they're excavating stuff in 1928 or 1923 or whatever is very, very what they would have been doing. Yeah. Have all the locals doing the muscle work. Somebody showing up going, has a brush in his hand. Stuff all laying on a table, just kind of being, hey, we found and they're breezing past all of the data, and they're focusing on the big things or the shiny things or the things. Yeah. So that's kind of accurate.
Howard?
I mean, I agree, but equally, one can do the nitpicking things on the opening scenes. Like there's random men standing on tops of, pulling buckets up from one stage to another for no freaking reason, and then there's a donkey going past. There's one sieve. There's one sieving couple of blokes I saw, which I made. So that was interesting. They thought about sort of 200 dudes all spread all over randomly, a few camels and donkeys or asses or whatever, and there's one guy sieving.
There's actually one guy with a screen.
Yeah. So I did like that. I mean, it gives you that impression of organized chaos. I like the fact that at one level they show local workmen, but they also but they have to put a white foreman. They have to put a European foreman in the picture.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not so sure. I don't know. I don't know about early Egyptian. I would have. That's a questionable area, but But anyway, I don't know enough about it. But I would say, yeah, it gives that vibe of this is a colonial project. Whoever this Professor Langford is, and his daughter, she didn't find it. She just nicked it off a table. The locals found this locket, So and then she has the gall to tell Jackson later on, "I found this." No, you bloody didn't, you silly old German cow. You nicked it off a table that some Egyptian found. You couldn't even, and then you took it away. So any context I did have has been lost. Anyway, so my point is. I'm just being mean, but my point. Yeah, the opening impression of archaeology in the 20s is fair enough, but equally, and then that's the last archaeology.
Very true.
When we go to this new world, the Dr. Jackson doesn't seem to have a clue what he's doing in archaeological terms. He doesn't even think, oh look, we've literally just come out of a structure that is of Egyptian lintel style of a temple that is sitting in front of, and then he just pronounces, oh, this is a replica of the pyramids of Giza, which makes no sense even in the narrative, because it would mean that Giza is a replica of this. But anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is, he then just wanders off with this random camel thing, and then even when he's looking at the subterranean space beneath their village, the native village or whatever it is, he doesn't seem to have any archaeological inkling. He's not interested in the material culture of the people. It's only just accidentally through the language he thinks, these people have a connection to ancient Egypt. There's nothing. He's not observing any of the basics. So if you were an archaeologist, even if you're not anthropologically trained, and you encounter a living people, you'd go, oh my gosh, look at the way they're carrying baskets, look at their pottery, look at their gender roles. People mock him for actually going near a fire. He would have been interested in those or commenting on those things, not just a clueless buffoon who's no engagement with the material world and the people. He would look at the buildings and go, oh, look at the buildings we're seeing, And I did find it funny that the first photograph that any of this expeditionary team take is from afar of the village. So they come across this massive mine, a quarry, and no one's taking photographs. They're just standing there going, oh, look. It's only when they go to the I don't know, I'm just picking holes. I find it funny.
No, I think that's good.
But it's obviously I'm being acting as if this actually matters and not suspending disbelief. But I think it's funny, isn't it, that the 20s is when and I think there is a genuine point, because archaeology is seen as rooted in the 20s. We still when you all the people that Archaeowolf has to deal with have this view of archaeology as if it is in the 20s. That we are somehow relics, that we've been transported. Archaeowolf and we've just sort of emerged for 100 years, and we're just here. But no one really understands how we're here. No one teaches archaeology at universities. No one studies it. There's no professionals. It's just like we'll just have gangs of brown-skinned people who just do this labour for us. Well, it's not like that. But it's funny.
Exactly. And then I brought up the point with Ali last night while we were watching it. Could we say that Daniel then, and even then, as you pointed out, Howard, very poorly, now acts as a de facto anthropologist rather than an archaeologist in his dealings with the tribal people? And in this, a few of the things that stuck out to me was the idea, of course, that they see the amulet of Ra around Daniel's neck, and they assume that he must be somehow connected to Ra, and their first instinct is, here, take my daughter, and of course we know that doesn't happen. But it does bring me to something that of course will interest Howard, and that has to do with the resurrection. We know that Ra at some point was an alien. We know that the story goes that he takes over a boy's body, and he's in the Batha tank. Pardon me, I know that's a Star Wars reference.
The sarcophagus. It's called the sarcophagus.
The sarcophagus. Now, what I find interesting, and this is just me being a pain in the ass, is that Daniel has no game until he comes out of that sarcophagus. And then once he comes out of the sarcophagus, suddenly he knows how to woo a woman. And I'm just like, can we get that sarcophagus for a few men I know? Because that would probably help. That would help a lot of people.
It's not just it's not just being brought back to life. He has to be zapped by an alien gun device.
Now,
we need in our universe for a large
Part of what
fragment of the
gets
adult male
me
population and teenage male population.
exactly, and part of it is going to go a little bit into the series about what I know of it, but the portrayal of aliens as kind of this divine beings across the Stargate movie and in the series, particularly the Goa'uld, highlights this concept of advanced technology being misinterpreted as divinity. Sorry, I got to read my own words. This mirrors kind of the belief in the divinity of Jesus Christ, which was based on resurrection. So we kind of have that modeled in the fact that Ra was dying and he almost has this resurrection within this young man who gives up his body to
By force.
not willingly, yes, not willingly, forcibly. And that possibility is because of advanced technology. So we're seeing they know how to now extend these lives, but because they're very parasitic entities, which missed me the fact that his actual face looks like the classic alien you might see on X-Files, which is a whole other thing. But that's something that we see as well. And I wonder if that was something the writers were doing, is kind of show the parallel of death, resurrection as part of showing what a divine being is. But I know this kind of touches into Howard's wheelhouse and the idea of death and mortuary practice.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one level. I have nothing else to add other than that. Yeah, the idea is it's all a sham. This we find a like a Mitch McConnell kind of ancient alien who's just like trying to survive forever, you know, sort of keeps going on, sapping the will out of everyone around him, you know. If that's not too, I don't know enough about US politics, but it seems like an appropriate analogy.
Oh, no, he's just too old.
There? He was just sucking in.
He's too old to know what it is.
Yeah, he is. I mean,
they cover that in the TV show too.
But you get my point, is that, you know, it's actually really quite disappointing that there's the alien, the Ra, is just a power-hungry, petty, selfish, craving immortality, and it will do anything to match that. But it's also utterly clueless. Let's just sacrifice them by standing them on a ramp, and with the one guy we're going to trust, we'll kill you if you don't do it, and believe he'll do it. And they've run away. You know, there's a randomly fire into the ground. And another moments where he just has this band of kids who just stand in his way is the only defense he had from the really clever move of Kurt Russell's character of just taking a weapon off one of the guards. You know, so he's not a very clever ancient alien. He's not a very canny. He's not let's put them in chains and dangle them over a pit or something. Let's just leave them loose to get away. Oh no, look, they've got away again. You know, but that aside, he is genuinely, I suppose you could justify that as a kind of so disconnected from reality. Oh no, I'll just run away now into space, and oh no, I left the transporter on. They sent me the bomb. No, I didn't think of that. You know, it is kind of this so superior, so arrogant that doesn't realise that all the aspects of their downfall are there to be exploited. But I did like that. I thought that was, it's a good example of this idea of the fact that all of this gear is of religion is to impress and impose and to exploit the labour and to, you know, force a hierarchy. And there's a truth in there in terms of ancient societies too. There's it's not outrageous.
Ancient societies.
Yeah, and Mitch McConnell.
Yeah, and Trump.
I will say.
Go ahead.
No, please.
I was gonna say, package, bad guy. Yeah, it is wonderful how bad guy he is, because I mean, he could be in Austin Powers. He could be in a James Bond film. You have like James Bond, who is the best spy in the world. We're going to put you in a room with a window, and we're not going to actually check you for stuff. Yes. You're just going to world then. But in the show, they actually continue that trope with every single Goa'uld character you come across, and they tie it into the technology having, get this, side effects, you know, because the Goa'uld are just takers. They're just parasites. They didn't make any of this stuff. So the sarcophagus was made by a completely different species.
Oh.
But the more you use it, the crazier you become. The more insane you become, the more villainous you become. So there's Daniel Jackson suddenly has a spine, but at the same time you have, and they do explain this in the show. The alien in the show in the beginning in the movie is in the show, but he's not Gould. He's Thor, the Asgard. So in the show, they have the little gray aliens who kind of sort of did the same thing as the Gould to they've inserted themselves into human history and such, but they're the Norse gods because you have to have the good guys versus every other gods, regardless of ethnicity. I have to point that out. But they actually in the show point that out that that the Gould, the snake, inside your head took over an Asgard, and that body was failing. And then he took over a human body because human bodies are so easy to repair. Just put them in the magic device, and it fixes them, and it burns out their brains so they're insane.
So to pick up on the Rabbi's point, he's slightly more charismatic towards women, but many make you mad and crazed.
Power
That's
hungry.
very interesting.
That's schizophrenic.
Really interesting.
That explains so much about U.S. politics.
Yes, there's proof. Okay, we don't need, this is just going to go off on a tangent, we don't need some guy to show up and say, we have aliens and non-human things in aviation. We need to look at Trump and McConnell and DeSantis and all of them. They are just, they're regular humans who are probably not that horrible. It is the snake in their heads, and they're sitting in the sarcophagus getting zapped with alien energy that's boiling their brains.
We need to find
There
the
it is.
reanimation bathtub.
Could we add that probably Boris Johnson as well is also being zapped in the sarcophagus with alien energy?
I think if they were going to
had
do some regeneration on Johnson, they could do a better job with his hair. Come on.
They have, like,
Yeah,
in the show, they have so many little gods and little deity characters that have some sort of role in places because you have to add more people to the story. But they have like the disgusting, flabby old dude who that's his thing. And yeah, Boris Johnson.
This is so interesting to me. And something that I really interesting, especially for the time. 1994, there was a lot of white saviorism in movies. Like, there just was. And this really did not go the way I expected. I expected white guys show up, save the whole indigenous tribe, and they're all thankful to all these white guys because white guys have made it all better. But really, it's literally the white guys going, how about you save yourself? And, we're just showing you that you are empowered to do it yourself, and we're not here to save you as much as we just need to save our own asses. That aspect is somebody who is indigenous, not seeing the whole, like, I'm here to, like, Braveheart you or Dances with Wolves you.
I'm from the government, and I'm here to help.
Yeah,
I
the
saw
Dances
it
with
differently.
Wolves thing. Did you?
I saw
Okay,
it
go ahead.
I saw it as here's this populace who saves the white man.
Yeah, because
Okay,
they'd be all,
yeah.
they would have been shit out of luck. And if Ra had done his plan, Earth would have been, Colorado would have been a hole in the ground.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like
I really like that.
They were all captured, and it was the indigenous populace who went and gathered the white man's weapons and saved them.
Yeah, and what I did like that because I'm so used, especially in the 90s, it was a huge trope to show that, white people are here now to make all your lives better. And to see this indigenous tribe say, no, we're pissed. We've been in servitude for God knows how long, been made to be slaves, and we didn't have to. It reminded me of A Bug's Life. If the ants know that they're bigger population than us, they're going to figure it out. And the next thing you know, we're shit out of luck. And suddenly Ra and Anubis and I mean, and when I was a kid, I thought Ra was a girl and I was all about her. And then I was like, damn it.
I'd like to point out that they are literally a cult. Like, their entire life is in service to this higher being. Yep. So they are literally a cult.
May I pick up on those points? Because I hadn't thought it through, and maybe I wasn't sure how you'd go with this, because obviously there is a white saviour dimension, but equally, I felt there were at least 4 groups of agents within, or individuals or groups within the people of this planet. Do we actually find out the name of the planet? I can't even remember. But
Abydos.
Abydos. Oh,
Abydos.
Right, okay. So
I just might know where to go. I have the address to
You're
Abydos.
not a fan
You're
or anything.
literally going to be disappearing any moment if we get the power up on the machine, which we never understand why they have to power up. Anyway, never mind. Yeah, no,
I'm
it's
an
good.
archaeologist. I work for the U.S. government, and I command an interstellar battle cruiser on the weekends.
Nothing wrong with that.
How do we get tickets to that? Do I turn in flight points that I have, or
right?
do I have
no
is
idea.
there a sign-up sheet? You're the one who pilots the battle cruiser. I'm just trying to get the rest of us up on the ship.
Ass.
I thought in a very simple adventure sci-fi movie, they do manage to pack in. You have Shahari, who says, this Jackson dude is actually telling us there's a way out. He has by accident, because he's a useless communicator, he's managing to communicate to me and tell me that my people have a future that is not in slavery, right? Point 1. So we have Shahari, and she basically is the lead hero, really, of the whole story. Then you've got Shaka and his little ugly mate who dies. But Shaka is the one that sort of does the leads, becomes the Neil has, or whatever his name is, and or his, and becomes the sort of leader of the rebellion. And then you have Kasuf, who's the ultimate arse-licking, brown-nosing leader of the people, but he realizes, holy shit, it's not an alien, it's not a god. What's really funny about him is he's not shocked that one of the Horus gods can be killed. He's shocked that it's a black dude in a mask. But anyway, let's not go there. But the point is, Kasuf realizes, oh my god, we've been duped all this time. So there's at least those 3, and then there are the complicit, the group of indoctrinated future bodies to be, or whoever these kids are hanging around him. Yeah, and the Horus guys, they're presumably human too, but they are the henchmen. They are the absolute. So you have at least 3 agents of resistance who, and then you have these the cronies, the henchmen. So I thought that was for a simple action sci-fi film, that's pretty good. So I wasn't sure how you guys were going to go with this, but I actually would defend the movie as well on that account and say that, to be honest, it does give a fair sense of any power structure and how to break it, and it's simplified, of course, but it does give you a sense of, it's not just Jackson and O'Neill turning up and going, hey, come with us, we're Americans, fuck yeah, let's blast these guys.
Notice that all the kids who don't know how to read or write, all they know how to do is break stone out of the ground, automatically know how to handle, load, cycle the action, and safely fire in a direction that's not hit their own people, but hit the bad guys. Fully automatic military hardware.
And just to toot my own horn, I would like to point out that Artie is Israeli and Jewish. So if you want to save a bunch of men, you send a Jewish woman to do it.
Well, I didn't know that, but there you are.
That's why you're here.
Am I allowed to interject the more serious questioning by giving you my favourite quote from the whole film?
Yes, absolutely.
I don't know if anyone else has a favourite line, but my favourite line is obviously O'Neill's character with the line. I shall do it in a British accent, so it doesn't. I won't try and mimic Kurt Russell accent.
Absolutely do it. Absolutely
you
mimic.
Give my regards to King Tut, arsehole.
That's your favorite line?
That's my favourite line.
Yep. And that shows how the only thing that Americans know about in archaeology is King Tut and the pyramids.
And look, Daniel Jackson is actually consulting a book on the face of King Tutankhamun in his research. Why? Anyway, it doesn't matter. But yeah.
Because they just had to pass off the idea of archaeology. They just had to sell that the item was old. That's all. That's the only premise of archaeology in the movie.
Yep. So this is a guy, if you think about it rationally, this is a guy who is the descendant of Egyptians 10,000 years ago, who therefore has never seen ancient Egyptian civilization on planet Earth, has no clue, and is being told, give my regards to King Tut, arsehole. The most worst insult you can do before you kill someone is to tell them something that it's like sort of you're just about to kill Henry VIII and you say, suck on this and say hi to Churchill, dickhead. And you go, what are you talking about? Who's Churchill?
That's right.
It's like,
no, it is not wrong.
Anyway, I'm being pedantic again.
I will say, overall, I freaking loved the movie.
Yes.
Stood up for me. There's a lot of movies from the 90s that if I were to watch it now, I'd be like, oh,
yeah,
well, that's terrible. But it actually stood up for me. I was still very involved in it. I understood why Daniel Jackson decided to stay as well. And I don't think it was just purely for Shaori, although if that's the reason why, I don't blame him. She's pretty. Don't kill me, Allie. But I think it had a lot to do with that's where he felt most comfortable. I feel like he did feel like he was a man outside of the world in the place he was, again, a bumbling linguist who has no job, walking around with, everything he owns in 2 suitcases and no one takes him seriously. Here's an opportunity to be part of a community that actually will embrace him, and he can also embrace back and feel like he's actually doing something. So I absolutely understand why he stayed and why he didn't want to go back. I also wonder, and because I haven't seen this series in a very long time, so I'm looking forward to it, but I'm trying to figure out, obviously they don't close down the Stargate, because even though he says, I promise I'll shut it down on the other side. So I wonder how this goes into Daniel becoming back to the Stargate and working on the team. And so now, after all this, I'm going to have to say, I know we were planning on watching Good Omens, but I'm going to have to get into, Stargate.
We can do both.
The show really does tie up a lot of ends with all of the characters in the at least O'Neill and Jackson and Skara. Because Kowalski dies. Oh, yeah, sorry.
Listen, only because we are on TikTok, but there's a finger I have for you right now because spoilers.
Well, okay, that's go ahead.
I was going to say, am I allowed to mention the mortuary meta points or whatever? I don't know if that's worth.
Yes.
Do we have time for that? I just wanted to quickly say that I thought, yes, of course, you have the baddie who's clinging on to immortality down the millennia as a greedy, selfish, power-hungry POS, right? So you have that. But the other side is of a man who is on the edge of suicide. This is the O'Neill character whose son has been lost to firearms accidentally going off, mainly because he seems to be hiding his own pistol in his son's bed. But I'm joking, of course. That's not the point. But the point is he's lost his son to firearms and he's suicidal and he's called back to active service. He knows he's going to die. And he does the classic line that gets repeated through our Western culture is we should never die. We should never live to see our own offspring pass away, to put it in neutral terms. And I think that is those are the balance. And so Jackson's actually in between. It's really the O'Neill character that sort of captures that for me, is he's not just a military nutter. He's trying to play that role, but really, as Morgan said, he's there almost like exploited or accepting his fate, that he's been given a mission that's a one-way ticket, and he has nothing to go back for. Poor wife, who main job seems to be just standing around the home smoking and not feeling stressed that her husband's sort of just sitting in her son's room. So, I mean, she never really figures as a character, sadly. But I think the idea of more how you deal with the loss of the trauma of a loved one and is touched upon in a movie like this in a way that very few movies properly do, and then it's complementing, contrasting with this power hungry, alien who just wants to cling on to life forever, and I just thought that was just worth making as a balance, between.
If I can bounce off of what you're pointing out, you kind of see that right from the beginning.
Yes.
You can see that he immediately goes into dad mode.
Yeah.
Right, and just even with the lighter, you can see without so many words that he automatically goes back into parent mode, where he's like, go ahead and look at it, go ahead, you keep it. And then immediately when he touches the gun, he freaks out because of that trauma. But you can see the humanity in him, and they did a very good job adding it in a couple of spots to show that he's far more than just, as you said, a military nutter who is, hell-bent on self-destruction.
In fact, it's a very generous portrayal of a colonel. It's not, kind of characters aren't usually given a generous Hollywood portrayal, and I think his military role is almost incidental, other than to play off Jackson. It's very much about he is a father to a son that's been lost, and I thought that was really good. As there's stuff to be discussed there. I think rather outside of the archaeology and sci-fi context.
I was amazed at how much I really enjoyed it, because like I said earlier, I was very afraid that it wouldn't stand up. Please, Morgan.
Oh, somebody said hello in the chat. So
I thought you were raising your hand. I was like,
there is something I want to say. Constantly, Mom, she's seen the show. She hasn't seen the show in like 15 years, and having a life outside of everything, you forget details. So she's seen the show.
Oh, who, me?
Don't get upset about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen the show.
Not remembering all of it. I watch the show once a year. That is my binge. I don't watch modern shows. I don't get into newer stuff. I watch Stargate all the way through in like a month. That is my thing to do over the winter.
I think that because you're an archaeologist, Howard and I are going to get you to watch Doctor Who. It's an old show.
I know.
It is
Stargate is the longest running sci-fi series outside of Doctor Who, and it is a really close thing.
See, and my ex loved it and had all of the series, so that's how I was introduced to the series, and I did enjoy it. But I haven't seen it since it was first out, so I haven't seen it in a long time. But I'm looking forward to rewatching it, and I'm probably picking up a lot of things that I missed the first time. That's one of the things I love about being a nerd, is that every time you rewatch something, there are new things. Like Howard and I going through Doctor Who, I've seen some of those episodes multiple times, but Howard has pointed out and said, hey, have you ever noticed this before? No, I didn't. And I've seen that episode like 17 times. So it's nice that, you can see things, especially when you're a fan, and always pick out something new from it.
Can I ask a question about the portrayal of baddies as somehow not conforming to a modern gender role? Is that something that is that something that is common in the 90s? Do you think? Is it typical? So. Yeah,
very much so.
Overweight or ugly and ambiguous, definitely.
Yeah, if we think about it, the same actor who played Ra also played the transgender woman in The Crying Game. And
I knew there was somewhere I'd seen.
Not seen that.
Oh yeah, I'm a cinephile. I know where everybody has acted.
I mean, it's a great film, and
it was a very good film.
Dated in many ways.
Very dated, but it was it was ahead of its time for its time. So it was the same actor who played them, and that's how they got the role for Raw, is because of The Crying Game. They saw that and said, we want this because they believed that's how the gods were portrayed during the time of Egyptian gods being worshipped, as they were gender ambiguous. The idea of masculinity during the time of Egyptian worship is completely different than our modern interpretation of masculinity. Men wore thick makeup and were live and supposed to look godlike. So it makes to look godlike was to look that. I mean, if we're being honest, pharaohs had self-fun into the Nile River to ensure that crops and the Nile River would run and stay plentiful each year. They would have the pharaohs go out and right into the Nile. So, and yeah, their idea of masculinity was something you wouldn't see someone who is like you or Morgan. You know, they'd want these, men were very skinny, very tall, and yeah, so it goes to play into that why they chose the actor.
No, but we're incredibly handsome.
No, yeah.
You know, we just got to accept.
Yeah, I know you're both very incredibly handsome, but you're also taller and you're stockier. You have wider shoulders. You know, that kind of thing. That
Just
was
say
not
I'm fat.
something.
I get it.
I do not think you're fat. Oh my God, you're lucky you're in Montana. If I could reach through the screen, ooh, I would strangle you with your own beard. So all I'm saying is,
strangled with love and affection.
Of course, with love and affection. Don't you say bad things about my friend. That being said, I found the wardrobe for him very interesting because he's wearing basically a corset. Now, don't get me wrong. He looked fabulous in this corset. I mentioned that. I was like, and that's a look. But it does push against the idea of what masculinity is. And in the time, in the 90s, I wonder if they did that on purpose, or if it was just the costumes Egyptians kind of looked like. Now, they went a little big with it, with the big, sun almost, and, the big pillar looking the things behind his head. But yeah.
But it's usually only
I
female baddies that go up to a male and touch them on the face before they threaten them with death. Or say goodbye, or something like this, and I thought that is really kind of really distinctive aspect of the one scene where Jackson and Ra are interacting. I thought was very, was deliberate. It just struck me as a very female baddie moment. If just I don't know.
They definitely did play with the idea of gender role in this movie, especially in terms of Ra. I'm sorry, you had your hand up, Allie.
I think in this sense, it was more just thinking, what would an Egyptian alien look like? Yeah. And that's what they ran with. But as an overarching theme, yes, in the 90s, anything effeminate on a male body was bad. So that was a theme of the 90s. It was either that or the big, burly, like Hulk Hogan type.
Yeah, and we see that across, if we think about Scar in The Lion King at the same time, Scar is very effeminate. This is a lion who's queer-coded. They definitely queer-coded Ra. They did that a lot with baddies, especially in the 90s in American film. I can't say much to British film, but yeah, in American film, a lot.
In fact, it's an interesting factor that if you are doing an expedition to another universe, surely even the American military in the 1990s would want to include female and non-binary individuals as part of that expedition. You would want to make sure that you're not just sending a bunch of guys. I would have thought they would have thought that through, and maybe is adept to actually real languages. I don't know. It just bugs me, these things, because I would have thought, when you think of the research that went into Aliens in terms of the way they portrayed the future military going onto a planet, and this is 10 years or 8 years before Stargate, you would have thought that there's other way. I'm saying there's other ways we should see more intelligent thought gone into how you'd send an expedition through a Stargate portal. I don't know, maybe the show picks up on that, but in terms of a film, I think it's really interesting. There was no, we're just going to send one black guy over because he'll do something special and he'll say a few lines. But apart from that, it's just these standard. I just thought that was a bit of a doomed to fail type expedition. You should at least have one British for diversity's sake. You should have one British male.
They definitely should have reached out to you. I think you were an archaeologist in the 90s. They could have reached out to you and said,
I would have been there.
Yeah, it was before I was born, but
Of course.
Question, Morgan.
Yeah.
Was Jackson fluent in modern Egyptian? Could he speak it?
I don't know if they actually ever established that. One of the things he does point out, so I think he would have at least a can order something in a restaurant, ask directions kind of grip on it, is he points out that the dialect hasn't been heard in like 1 or 2,000 years on Earth.
Yeah, there's that.
Which means, I mean, you could send me back to when Shakespeare's writing and throwing plays up in London. I can't understand half of what the traditional way that's written is in Middle English or whatever, because the dialect does evolve. Don't necessarily follow that same evolution, or they last longer in, multiple dialects share the same symbols on paper, which is why after looking at something and he says it out loud or reads it, and that's like, I can read Spanish, I can read a Spanish word, doesn't mean I can speak the language. Yep. He reads the word, and then Shaore recognizes what he's trying to say. And they do have that back and forth where he reads through and she illustrates the difference as a result of, 5,000-6,000 years of this population being separate from ancient Egypt. So.
And we can see that in modern English too. If we've seen somebody who's read a word but never have had the opportunity to hear the word spoken, they might actually pronounce it in a completely different way than it's normally pronounced, because they've only read it on paper. They haven't actually heard the way the word is supposed to be enunciated.
A boy named Gooey.
Like aluminium. And we know that that's not how you say aluminum, but here we are.
Those eyes.
Yeah, no, I think he can read. I think they established that Jackson can read it, and he can read it out loud. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean that he would be able to have a conversation more than ordering a sandwich.
Right. To me, it was more insinuated that he could read it out loud. Mm-hmm. It's like he knew what the images meant. Which, okay, so you see something that distinguishes a hamburger, you look at it and you go, that means hamburger. But it doesn't spell out hamburger. So how would you then phonetically say it?
Right.
That's what I was curious about. That's what I wanted to last night. Is as they were going through and he was trying to get the pronunciation, it's because he's never spoken it. He's only ever just looked at it and said, this is what this means.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that, I think that makes sense. One of the bigger questions I have is, and this is outside of archaeology and theology, this is just about pop culture. What do you think about this movie made it such a huge phenomenon that it has spawned how many different series, and what continues to make people so invested in the Stargate universe?
Let me math here for a second.
Math minute. I love it. Archaeology in space. Hello, Books and Chocoholic. And just so you know, Howard, Seth wanted to point out that before he destroys anyone, he sticks his finger straight up their nose. So, just that to give some context into the face touching.
Everybody needs a trademark.
Yeah, it's been done to me many times, but I've always escaped from the piranha pit or the shark infested tank, or many an archaeo villain has tried to do that on me, and they've regretted it.
So there's 4 series,
okay,
and 2 movies that I know of right off the top of my head, in addition to the original movie. And the 2 movies are like, made for TV movies. So
right. Okay. Sorry, I didn't know.
They use those movies to tie together the storyline in the show.
Okay.
So,
because it's not slowing down. It has
No,
a
it's not.
huge fan base. I was looking this up because I like to do my research.
Mm-hmm.
It has got a huge fan base. It really does rival people who are fans of Doctor Who and Star Trek,
Yeah.
like in terms of TV shows. It is like people are still going to fan conventions. I know one guy who has every patch on his wall in his office. Has a couple battle cruisers on his desk.
What?
There's
people who have way more than I do. I think it's I do want to look at it as it's easy to connect to.
Yeah.
Because
okay.
I've said this, when people say what got you into archaeology, when I was growing up, there was Indiana Jones, who he's a hero that fights Nazis. He's not an archaeologist. It was never really about archaeology with Indiana Jones when I watched it as a kid. And then, you have the archaeologist who's in the show for 5.5 minutes in The Fifth Element in the beginning, and he dies.
That's one.
But then you have in the show,
because
I started the show first before I saw the movie. I'm that awful. You have this character, because I liked archaeology back then. I was.
Uh-oh.
Oh no! Well, he did say it was there.
Nope. I got it. Why is it not charging? Damn thing. Anyway, I had. Here's this character who is not necessarily the, your stereotypical, patriotic American male. He's a nerd. He's a dweeb. Yet he's still saving the world. Show the characters, the smartest main character who probably saves the world 60 to 70% of the time, or is the biggest part in making that happen, is a woman. And then you have an entire then another character that you have is not only is he he's not white, and he's very African. He also has this, even though he's this big burly, massive muscled guy, he doesn't seem to really portray any sort of gender focus. And they all kind of get to, and then you have Mr. America, which is Jack O'Neill, who gets to blow stuff up. And one of the things that Richard Dean Anderson, the guy who plays him in the show, also played MacGyver. He's like, I got to blow stuff up in this show, and that's why it was my favorite show to do. Meanwhile, in MacGyver, he doesn't blow anything up or use,
chicken wire and chewing gum.
Yep, but you still have you have characters who are relatable to people who want to be involved in, roles that were not necessarily, at least in the mid and late 90s, you didn't. There were not very many names of women in the sciences or something like this back then. And then you have Samantha Carter rolling in the show, and she's a role model. And then you have Daniel Jackson, who's nerdy, and he's not really what you expect a hero to be, yet he is one. You have Teal'c, who isn't a background character. He has an immense story within the show. He plays an important role, and hey, the world would end a lot if he wasn't there. I mean, it gives they're small snapshots, and they're kind of dated snapshots, but it still gives snapshots of other belief systems, other cultural importances and such. And it shows that, of course, you can unite all of those things against one bad guy. And it shows that humans, despite the fact that we're all sort of different, can unite against something bad or something that threatens us. And we can get over our issues to deal with this thing. And I think because it has that tie-in of being relatable, people can see themselves in it. It's not like Doctor Who, which takes place in multiple dimensions. It's not in the future. It's today. Teal'c lives in an apartment in the TV show for like 2 episodes. He drives a Dodge Durango. O'Neill has a pickup truck. It's, you see the life you live right now. And then, of course, it's, that's something that I think really does make it alive.
I am a huge believer that nerds shall inherit the earth. That I have always been. Even growing up, I believed that, it's great that you know how to blow things up, but do you know how to rebuild society once you've blown it all up? I'm a huge believer that nerds and geeks and the whole bit will inherit the earth. And I like to see positive portrayals of masculinity that does not have anything to do with I have to be a manly man. Because as we know, both men and women and everyone in between come in a lot of different ways that we outwardly express ourselves that do not have to fit into the binary. So, and now see, you're like a walking advertisement for the show, because I'm hearing you talk about it and I'm like, listen, I'm not doing anything else for the rest of the night, babe. So are we going to watch that? Or...
I told you you were going to.
Monty Python's Manly Men is a great thing.
So to close up, because we've been on about an hour and a half, what would you say your takeaway is from the movie? And yes, please go ahead. You got your hand up.
Saying I wanted to go first.
Oh, okay. What would you say your takeaway is from the movie? And to follow that up, we're gonna do the series together. Right? We're doing that. Okay.
Yes. And one word: ethnocentrism.
Oh, okay. No, expound. You can't just say ethnocentrism without giving an explanation.
Word. You know it is my favorite word, and I love finding it in all forms of media.
Yes, you
absolutely. Do. And when they first sit down with the villagers, that was like the first thing. It's when's it going to happen? When's it going to happen? Oh, look, new people. When's it going to happen? When are you going to insert your nationalistic superiority over this poor little village of brown people?
And does that continue to be your biggest takeaway from the movie?
I would say so. It's just that didn't disappoint. It was expected and it didn't disappoint. I watched the movie when I was younger, probably not right when it came out. But the last time I watched it was probably a good 8-9 years ago. Mm-hmm. It's always held up as a good movie to me. Mm-hmm. Not one of my favorites, but still, it's really good. It has a lot of memorable points to it. That even as we were watching it last night, it's I remember that. Oh, yeah, I forgot about that part though. It's just all around. It's fun, even though it's ancient aliens.
Yeah,
it is a little ancient aliens. How do you? Okay, so and I'm sorry to follow up very quickly. How do you? Because especially with you, Morgan, I'm on your platform. I see what you talk about. And the fact that you, as an archaeologist, are like, it's not ancient aliens, with loving so much a plot that's like, it was ancient aliens.
It's science fiction. It's me loving this so much and liking it so much is on the same level of people who love Lord of the Rings so much.
Very good point. Very good
point.
But
they're not walking outside going, there's orcs, or there's a giant tower to the east.
Don't say that to Howard. He's going to be heartbroken.
It's probably, I don't know, where's it's in France. To the south, to the southeast of you, sir. There's this, I recognize it as not real. And I recognize, as I watch the show, because I'm looking at it from my point of view, it does continue to, there are issues with it, of course. It was a product of the late 90s, early 2000s. It evolved as society moved and changed and reflected upon itself. But it's I can square that it's science fiction. I like
you're
that.
Heads and shoulders above a lot of people who probably believe that that's how life began.
And I never watched Ancient Aliens. I never read von Daniken's books until later. So my introduction to aliens building the pyramids and aliens are gods and aliens built human civilization, my first introduction to that is a science fiction. It is not as anything else, you know. And then it's after all of the educational stuff gets run out there, run up the flagpole and done, you notice that it's all of the good, refer back to them, look at them documentaries that people remember. The History Channel and the Discovery Channel all stops at like 2004. Everything prior to that is good. Everything after that is shit. And it falls down this road of reality television and shocky hair guy and all of the packaged Graham Hancock bullshit after they've run out and they can't produce any more educational stuff because it's boring. But so many people, that is their introduction to this, is Ancient Aliens. And then they see a movie which is like, oh, well, they got this because it's inspired by real life. But not. So.
Did you have a follow-up? Yes,
I think 2 points that hopefully will connect. Firstly, Stargate, the movie, epitomizes the late 20th century manifestation of a longer running phenomenon of Western Egyptomania, orientalizing and fantasizing about ancient Egyptian death culture, stereotyping, fantasizing about Egyptian death culture, and also late 20th century ancient alien pseudo-archaeologies and science fictions. And in that sense, it's a success of capturing those two and connecting those two things. It's an example of how pointing that out is not a hot take, and that doesn't take us anywhere, but it shines a light on just how so many constructive and possible engagements with those fantasies, with those Western gazes onto ancient Egypt, can be mobilized to capture and educate and engage people. In the same way as when we talked about the Mummy films, we know this is so fantastical and ludicrous, and yet we can all sit around as academics and see the positive and constructive power of these fantasies to capture the imagination. Mm-hmm. And it just throws into, it doesn't somehow excuse, in fact, it throws into even sharper relief how imbecilic and irresponsible it has been for major producers of documentaries and broader publishers to have given the space and time to the Hancocks and the other grifters who have insult everyone's intelligence and milk these fantasies, but try and translate it into a real historical phenomenon. And sadly, it shows how weak our broader popular culture is, susceptible it is to those fantasies. So what I'm trying to say is, we should celebrate this popular. We should see the problems and inherent, 19th, 18th, 19th century fantasized visions of Egypt that are embodied in this film, but we shouldn't castigate that film for it. But it only throws into sharper relief just how disastrous people, those that would grift this as some kind of let's see what something was.
I thought that was an excellent answer. I love it. I love that.
Oh,
I agree with you wholeheartedly. And of course, it's not a get together with the four of us if somebody doesn't castigate Graham Hancock, which I'm always here for. Like, I'm not even an archaeologist, and I want to punch that guy in the nose.
Well, I mean, you hear about him enough.
He has a face that's just punchable.
It is.
It is.
It really does.
It is.
if not, it's certainly worth holding down in front of some kind of dematerialization set of rings that come down on him.
Indeed.
You know, I could imagine
I
him.
don't have
While I
access
say
to that. What I have is a
Hancock,
belt
give
sander.
my regards to King Tut, asshole.
I think a belt sander would do. I mean,
give my regards to your mother culture, asshole.
Yes.
I love it. Well, I want to say thank you. You guys, I always have a great time anytime the four of us get together. I always feel like the odd man out being the soft science that I practice. But, you know, I always have such a beautiful time every time that we get together. I would love to encourage you, see if we can't do the series together. And I know. So I'm going to ask formally, how would you three feel about doing the Stargate series with me and breaking down the archaeological and theological aspects of all things Stargate? I think the first one is SG-1.
Yeah, I'm down.
Well, I figured you might be. And now we just have to convince Howard.
I'm skeptical.
Oh!
If Howard has
heart!
time, and
Ever the scientist.
Yeah.
You know, that's the thing, is if I have
Yeah,
time
this is
too,
true.
but I would be down.
Yeah.
I need
And
to do
obviously-
something fun because I'm working all the time. And not that my work isn't fun, it's just
Work.
All the time. I work all the time. This is like our one. I'm not going to speak for Allie, but this is like the one thing I get to do that is not work or related, where I'm not somebody's bugging me. Rabbi, I have a question about of Talmudic importance. So yes, this is my my how I blow off steam as well.
See, and for me, that's getting mad at my truck, but it's currently too hot to do that. So
you know what? That's
one?
what we need. We need Morgan to come help us with the truck. That thing is just getting more and more. Just seriously,
it's a fun one.
There's one in the driveway right now that I'm working on that's not mine already. You have to get in line for that. Yes, Howard's tie is awesome.
Oh my gosh, it is. This is the tie he wears when he is doing commemorations for graduation.
It's an official archaeology tartan, the European Association of Archaeologists.
The European
official,
Association.
Yeah. Not that I'm a member anymore.
He did. He warned me he was dressing up today and I was like, we feel honored that you would dress up. So I'm like, I'll even put on a dress. I haven't worn a dress in a long time, but I'll do it. I see your tie and I raise you. I look like a proper lady today. It's very strange, and don't take it for granted.
We appreciate everyone's backdrops and attire.
I want to say thank you again, guys, for joining me. You are my favorite people. Like, I have 3 friends, and all of them are right here. And I appreciate all 3 of you joining me. And if you have any last words to say, something you want to plug, something you want to talk about, now is the time. Nerd, what do you got for us?
Drink water.
Yes, drink lots of water. It's hot out.
Hydrate or die straight.
And sometimes mead, but mainly water.
Oh, yeah,
sometimes
mead.
Well, as soon as this is done, I'm going to go grab a beer. So.
Howard, do you have any of your plugins, something you're working on you want everyone to know about?
Nothing at the moment.
Okay. Morgan?
Thank you.
Read good sources. Cite them when you have an argument. Archaeology is the greatest job, except when I'm writing reports.
That's true. And for me, if you go to my bio in my LinkedIn, you're going to see a link for the Rainbow Railroad. It is an organization that helps trans people move out of red states and into places where they can get trans and gender affirming care. If you can help or you can donate, please do. If you can't, it's always okay. And remember to always please pay people for their labor. Thank you, guys. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you. I had so much fun. Bye.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to Howard Williams on YouTube. In addition, consider following the Archaeodeath WordPress blog at howardwilliamsblog.wordpress.com.